like to begin the second half of today's summit with continuing with the presentation of our first speaker of the day. Please put your hands together to welcome the Chief Commissioner, Large Taxpayers Office, Director General, DNFBPs, the Federal Board of Revenue, Mr. Muhammad Iqbal.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum. I'm honored to be provided this opportunity to continue with whatever I had been saying before and end my this small presentation or a brief speech. So where were we? We were discussing that Pakistan has been facing the most challenging and unique circumstances of its times when it comes to the FATF, and there was an extraordinary hard work put in by the agencies and individuals across the country, and as a consequence of that hard work, Pakistan was able to exit the grey list. That is what we were. But as a matter of fact, the situation in Pakistan was unique, and therefore I would say that this time the grey listing of Pakistan perhaps is a kind of case study that we need to examine, not only us from our perspective, but perhaps also by the FATF itself in the perspective of its own rules and practices as to how this particular organization is dealing with countries and jurisdictions across the world. So to begin with our perspective, that what are the lessons learned for us, I think the first and the foremost is that we now have a significant level of acknowledgement that there were certain strategic deficiencies in our AML-CFT regime, and that we did not bother to address those deficiencies over time. Despite the fact that there had been mutual evaluations of Pakistan before, and these deficiencies were identified time and again, but we perhaps did not take them seriously, and now we have this acknowledgement in place that these deficiencies were existing, and maybe to a certain level they are still existing, which we may require to overcome. The second is that while the FATF assessment of Pakistan was unprecedented, the response of Pakistan was unprecedented too. That indicates that once committed, we have that zeal, that resilience, and that dedication to deliver the unexpected. I mean, that is the kind of sign, a positive sign, that comes out of our grey listing. Third, it is the whole of the government approach across the federal and provincial organizations that, as a matter of fact, fosters teamwork and interagency coordination to combat the financial crimes, be that money laundering, terrorist financing, or other types of financial crimes. So if we take it in silos and we take it in a way that only one organization or one entity will be dealing with a particular crime, I think the results cannot be up to our desire or up to our satisfaction. So there has to be a whole of the government approach across the country in order to combat the menace of the financial crimes. Fourth, judiciary has a very significant role to play in the AML-CFT regime by avoiding the effective and dissuasive punishments. So if we want the culmination of every crime, from our perspective, should be the conviction of that particular individual or that particular entity, should be punished for the crime that has been committed. So, and that culmination takes place when the judiciary, as a matter of fact, awards the sentences. To that end, we need to continue unabatedly with the capacity building of our investigators, the prosecutors, and the judicial officers. Fourth, there is nothing durable unless sustainable. So we need to continue with the good work that we have undertaken the past 4 years in our own national interest, and not just for the sake of FATF. And last, it is time to proactively seek the FATF membership, in my opinion. And I've been advocating that since 2019. But this is something perhaps we should have been thinking about in the early 2000s when we were joining the APG. But now perhaps it's high time that we should seek the membership of this particular organization. It is not easy to attain the membership. It will take time, but at least the first step in that direction must be taken. There is a level of diplomacy that shall come into play. There should be other circumstances, the regional circumstances, the international circumstances in terms of our foreign relations which may come into play. But the first step must be taken as soon as possible. And Pakistan, you know, when we look into the FATF membership policy, what is the primary criteria in there? The primary criteria is that the country should be strategically important. So, I mean, there is no denying the fact that considering the region in which we are in, and considering the neighborhood that we have, the strategic importance of Pakistan, you know, cannot be underestimated. And then further, if we look into the quantitative and qualitative indicators required for the membership policy, in my opinion, Pakistan fulfills those indicators as well. For instance, let's take the quantitative indicators. So it looks into the size of GDP. Our size of GDP, though small, is still larger than Luxembourg, than Greece, than Iceland, which are the members of the FATF. It looks into the size of the banking sector. You all are aware of that. The size of our banking sector is still bigger than a number of FATF members. And it looks into the population. Pakistan is the 5th largest population in the world. The first 3 already being the FATF members. So we fulfill that particular criteria also. And if you look into the qualitative indicators, then there are, for instance, the impact on the global financial system, the level of AML CFT commitment that we have demonstrated so vehemently in the past 4 years, and that has been acknowledged worldwide, the level of AML CFT risks and the efforts which are undertaken to mitigate those risks. So the risks are very much well known to us. We have the national risk assessment in place, and the efforts which are there in place by you and all others to mitigate those risks, they are also very much known also. And the active participation in what they call the FSRB, the FATF-style regional body. In our case, that is APG. So we are the members of the APG since early 2000s, I guess, and we have undergone 3 mutual evaluations of this organization as well. So these were certain, thoughts that were coming into my mind when we look into the case study of Pakistan from our perspective. Now I'll discuss briefly that the case study of Pakistan is not only important for us. In my opinion, it is important for the FATF also. And it also requires a level of introspection or a degree of discussions or deliberations within the FATF. How? I'll raise 5 particular questions in this regard. And I think that those questions required certain discussions and deliberations within this intergovernmental body. First, whether the FATF composition demonstrates geographic balance, with 50% of this 39 members body coming from Western Europe, with no representation whatsoever from the Eastern Europe, except for the transcontinental Russia, with one country, South Africa, from the African continent, with only India from the South Asia, I think the answer to this particular question does not seem in affirmative. Second, whether FATF is using the same yardstick in its assessments across the board. Now, the FATF assesses the compliance of countries by taking into account the risk and context of that country. And to arrive at the risk and context of that country, FATF takes into account the MLTF risk of that particular country, the level of those risks, and other factors which come in play. But this raises certain questions. For instance, what if the risk and context of a country is subjected to perceptions, interpretations, or disinformation. I mean, I'll give you the example of the Indian Chronicles, the EU Disinfo Lab, which was, as a matter of fact, trying to create a particular perception to discredit Pakistan. Or I can give you the example of a recent United Nations Security Council counter-terrorism committee meeting held in Mumbai, in which India was propagating many things against Pakistan in its own way. And what about a number of developed jurisdictions and tax havens where the risk of money laundering is high, particularly in relation to the proceeds of crime emanating from developing countries? I mean, are they subjected to the same barometer of assessment? Are they put in the gray list as well? Are they being warned to be downgraded to blacklist in case any actions given to them are not timely and fully completed? So these are the questions which the FATF must look into. The third question is, are all the assessors in FATF, those who are on the assessment team, they are able to set aside their own preferences and national interests because they have to act as independent experts. They're not supposed to be nominees of a particular country, presenting the viewpoint of a particular country, taking into account the international political circumstances of that particular jurisdiction. That should not be the case, and that is what the FATF methodology clearly provides, that the assessors should not be unduly influenced by their national interests and must disclose any potential conflict of interest. If there is any potential conflict of interest, that must be disclosed. But was it the case in the case of Pakistan? Were all the assessors able to act as independent experts? I'll not answer that question, but I'll only refer to a statement of the Indian External Minister Jaishankar last July, in which he said that we ensured Pakistan to be retained on the grey list. The fourth question to the FATF is FATF increasingly becoming a tool of lawfare? And you know what is a lawfare? Lawfare primarily is the use of the complexity of the international rules in a manner to achieve certain objectives which otherwise would have been attained through kinetic means, through war, through bloodshed. So FATF needs to look into the instances where the web of standards have been used as policy tools to achieve warlike objectives. I mean, that's very important. And the recent context also is very important. We can look into what's happening in the FATF in respect of Russia. We've been looking at FATF in respect of many jurisdictions. So is it a kind of lawfare that is going on within the ambit of FATF? That particular introspection is required. And last question is that what rules are in place to avoid that no hostile jurisdiction joins the FATF assessment team to the detriment of the assessed jurisdiction. If India was one of our assessors, so the question is how far it is possible to maintain by FATF the image of an apolitical intergovernmental body. So in the end, I'll just reiterate that the case study of Pakistan requires a certain degree of introspection, not only in our part, within Pakistan, but also by the FATF as the intergovernmental organization in order to determine a balanced and sustainable way forward. I thank you all.